with us. Isabel, good afternoon to you.
Hi, I mean, I agree with everything you've said there, and I actually couldn't believe it when I heard Yvette Cooper thinks that the solution or an appropriate response to this absolute horror in Southport is to come up with some more verification process for buying knives.
Yes.
I mean, how fatuous is that? You're right that actually, having tried not that long ago to order a new set of kitchen knives for my own house a couple of months ago, it is actually a real pain. You know, they won't just deliver them willy-nilly. You've got to have an adult there to sign for it, blah, blah, blah. And the same in any supermarket. If you try to buy a knife, it's usually, you know, it's covered up with one of those special locking systems, and they do check that it's, you know, you're a certain age. But the reality is, as you said, unless anyone intent on murderous rampage somehow has no access to any house in the country from which they can just pluck a knife from a drawer, they're always going to be able to find that weapon, aren't they? I think what you say is a complete radical change in culture, zero tolerance, absolutely zero tolerance to any form of knife carrying. And it's really just part of a much wider thing, which is that there is way insufficient fear on the part of people who are involved in the wrong side of life, whether it's drug dealing or petty crime or whatever it may be, of any form of retribution. They basically just think, well, let's shrug, let's see, I'll probably get away with it, which of course is not what Axel Ruda Cabana would have been thinking. We are talking about a complete nut job here who wasn't thinking logically in that manner in the first place.
And it's interesting that there's no, it's not taboo carrying a knife, of course, for some of these kids. It's pretty standard de rigueur to walk around with a massive blade in the side of your trousers. Nobody cares, and you're kind of given house points among your peers for doing so. And I can only believe, Isabel, that part and parcel of that has been allowed, that sense of entitlement to carry a blade is partly because of the inept system that we have when it comes to how people are punished. And we now know that, you know, many people out there, that many of these kids that are caught carrying them face no penalty at all, bar a bit of a police caution.
Well, this government set completely the wrong tone right at the very beginning of the administration by literally releasing a load of prisoners. What message does that send out about your attitude to law and order, about how you intend to govern in the years ahead, about whether or not you are really, really serious about making sure that people are convicted of doing awful things are properly punished? It sent no such message whatsoever. It was basically a mass throwing up of the hands, a despairing cry of, well, our prisons are overflowing and we've got more people who need to be sent to prison, so let's just let out the ones that are already in there. Sure. You couldn't make it up, could you?
It's extraordinary. And the more this goes on, I mean, we all kind of wondered whether this government was going to be a little bit rubbish beforehand. Never in my wildest dreams,
if only that were all it was.
Indeed, never in my wildest dreams did I think it was going to be this bad. And the more I see it kind of play out, the idea of these people, I think their politics, their kind of political ideology, which underpins all that they are doing at the moment, doesn't allow them to see some of these problems. They see perpetrators also as victims, and it's within their DNA to analyse and conclude in this kind of bizarre manner. You know, we've got to understand what's going on in this. Sometimes you've got to get tough. Sometimes you've got to say there are bad people out there. They won't ever say that. What the best we get is an age verification. I'd like to see Home Secretary Cooper stand up and deliver us, but in the same way that you imagine what Donald Trump would say on knife crime. I mean, you don't have to be a massive Trump fan or supporter to see just the difference between how two governments are functioning.
And I think this is going to become, and as I've said before on Talk, an increasing problem for this government. It's not that everyone in the UK looks at Donald Trump and thinks he's a great hero, but what they do see is someone who's very sure what he's about and isn't afraid to use every power at his disposal to, as he puts it, fix the wrongs that he sees. And we don't see any such thing from this government. We just see kind of robotic prime ministerial statements. Honestly, the guy could just about as well be a wooden chair as a prime minister for all the life that he exudes. And people just yearn for something with more vibrancy about it, something with more inner conviction, someone who we feel as if they get it. They understand the despair of voters as they witness our country diminishing, and somebody who is as determined as Trump to turn things around.
Well, don't worry, Isabel, because all of our problems are soon going to be solved with digital ID. And that's going to put a stop to everything, because we'll have all of our bits and pieces into a smartphone. The British passport. Yesterday we talked about the British driving licence coming later this year into your smartphone. We now know the British passport by 2027 as part of a new government wallet where you can save your documents using this special government app. Let's have a little listen to an ad that was released just before Christmas, this by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology on the issue of digital ID.
I know it's a surprise for everyone, but I don't get asked for my ID anymore. But for loads of young people, they get asked all the time when they want to buy a drink. So we're changing the law so that next Christmas, young people will have their ID on their phone, so they won't have all of the hassle of needing to get ID or leaving their ID at home, or their paper ID getting lost or damaged.
Get in the bin, mate. I don't know who he was, but it was probably a £5,000 corporate gig, I'm guessing, Isabel. And there it is. Digital ID. It's the solution to everything.
Well, you know, I might have a different perspective to you on this. I'm currently in the Middle East, in a country where ID is needed for absolutely everything. And you have to show your ID if you've got a meeting in a building. You have to show your ID if you buy alcohol. You have to show your ID if you want to buy a mobile phone. And I'm honestly fine about it, because it also acts as a protection for anyone involved in any transaction. So, for example, if you are required to send money, a deposit for something, you get the ID of the other party, and you know that if they're actually some scam artist, they won't give you their ID, and then you won't be able to pursue them. So I've changed my view on this. I completely understand the libertarian arguments, you know, Big Brother is watching everything you do and so on. But we are in a position in our country, in the UK, where we have millions of people who have come in without the right documentation. They're not entitled to be claiming for things they're claiming for. We have uncontrolled immigration, thousands coming across the channel. I think ID may have actually reached a moment where it is justified. And actually, perhaps if we had a wide debate on this, you would find that more people are in favour of it than would have been some years ago.
Do you know what? I wouldn't have a problem with my driving licence. You know, I love, you know, if I can cut down on paperwork. I hate all of, you know, I subscribe to that stuff like there's no tomorrow. I think the problem occurs if that digital ID then begins to contain your, I don't know, your vaccination status or something like that. That's where it starts to get maybe questionable.
So I think health is in a sort of separate category, isn't it? And that should probably always be voluntary. Although, again, you can make a powerful case that most people with any common sense would be quite glad to have their blood group or any other kind of critical medical information about them. Just the essential stuff on a card that they could just show, whether it's at A&E or someone can pick it out your bag, and if it's an emergency situation. Because I'm afraid the reality is, when you are taken to A&E in a desperate situation, it cannot be guaranteed that the doctors, nurses and other healthcare professionals there can just tap your name into a computer and get access to your records. You know, people time and again in no condition to give their medical histories or tell emergency staff what they're on, what drugs they're taking and so on, are being asked to recite their own medical details, you know, and then they're in the middle of a heart attack.